Turn on the camera. And once again, welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is John Meredith, and I'll be your instructor for this observability administration class. The focus of this class is yesterday we learned about observability fundamentals, and today we're going to focus on how we set all that stuff up. So that's going to be our focus in this course. Again, my only ask of you is if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Odell, you want to say hi?
Yes, good morning and welcome. John has a plethora of information for you, so ask questions and I'll be here to help as well. Good luck.
John has a plethora of coffee. Anyway, let me stop the video sharing and let's go ahead and get started. So our goal here is we're going to talk about AWS observability setup. And so the first thing we're going to do basically 3 labs, and we've got these actually in the PDF that I'm going to upload and let you see here in a little bit. But we're going to log into the system, and we are going to use a CloudFormation template to set up our AWS observability solution. Okay. Then the second exercise is we're going to have to set up a Kubernetes cluster. Now, doing this Kubernetes cluster, we're going to do it all from the command line. So, Robert, are you running Windows? Or are you running? So Eric and Robert, are you guys running Windows? Or are you guys running Macs?
Mac.
Okay.
I'm on Windows.
Okay. And the reason I ask is because I've got a different set of directions for Windows that I need to locate real quick. But we typically do it on the Mac since we have Macs here at Sumo. But so we're going to sit there and set up an end-to-end observability with Kubernetes and set that little rascal up. And then we're going to turn on tracing for Kubernetes. Now, the problem is our Kubernetes environment really isn't doing anything. It doesn't have a web server installed, doesn't have anything. Therefore, we're not going to see any tracing data. But the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up tracing. We're going to sit there and configure an environment for tracing, a non-Kubernetes environment for tracing. And we will then see that. And then we'll do a summary, wrap it up, questions, give you a chance to take the certification exam. So the certification exam is mostly about the various steps and the various things that we do. So as I see questions in here, I'll certainly point them out to try to help you out. Okay. Again, like before, actually, hold on a second. I didn't update this slide. Shame on me. There is an offer here that we want you to take the certification exam right after the class. And of course, we will reward you with an Uber Eats voucher. So here is the link for the Uber Eats voucher. We'll provide that again. We get into the certification. You guys have been with us all 3 days this week. So this is another day in paradise. So hopefully you guys know the drill and we'll help you out as we get there. Okay, again, our objectives here are threefold. We're going to talk about AWS observability solution. We're going to install an AWS observability solution. We're also then going to install and set up Kubernetes cluster. And we are going to take that Kubernetes cluster and we are going to enable it for tracing. So that's ultimately the goal. If you already have a Kubernetes cluster set up, you'll have to do like 1 or 2 steps and it's done. So that's simple. But because we don't have a Kubernetes cluster set up, we got to go through the whole rigmarole. And I'll point this out as we go through it. And then transactional tracing, we're going to sit and open up using open telemetry. We're going to set it up so that we can take a non-Kubernetes application and we can send trace data into Sumo Logic. So those are the 3 things that we're going to do today. And I think you'll have a good time doing it. So if we look at the stack here, right, our application interface, application infrastructure, obviously we have good old AWS, and we want to be able to see across your AWS environment, okay? Later on, we'll talk about Kubernetes and setting up our Kubernetes stuff, as well as our application and open telemetry. So we'll go through these various layers of our architect to basically see what's going on. So this first exercise, we're going to open up and see our AWS environment. So how do we do this? Well, typically, if you're sitting there trying to access an AWS environment, there are a lot of challenges that you face. You know, time to get it operational. I mean, I admit AWS spins up fairly easily, but you know, there's a little tweaking and stuff you got to do, things you got to add on and all that stuff. Time to get your security locked in. And then, of course, you want to get some problems of diagnosing and isolating the elements that you need to monitor. Time to take to troubleshoot and resolve and mitigate those incidences. So our AWS observability solution solves those problems. we provide a framework using a CloudTrail template. I'm sorry, excuse me, using a CloudFormation template that will basically install this AWS observability solution, and it will set up your dashboards and everything you need, stuff in Sumo, stuff in AWS, and you will be, in fact, good to go. Okay. Identifies the elements subject to the specified operational issues or security threats and vulnerabilities. And of course, it's going to minimize the time. It's going to be very, very easy to get set up. How do we do this? Well, typically, we're going to take and use an existing template or create an existing template that you're going to save locally or in an S3 bucket. And then we're going to use this CloudFormation template to create the stack. The stack is your environment. What systems do you need? What resources do you need? That sort of thing. So we're going to use an AWS CloudFormation template to do this. This AWS CloudFormation template will declare the AWS resources you want to create, configure. It will also set up the automation of collection and logs. So it's going to go into Sumo. It's going to build out all your collectors. It's going to build out all your sources. And it's going to install the out-of-the-box dashboards in Sumo Logic. Now, again, there's a test question here. So you want to be aware that this CloudFormation template is going to do it all, AWS and Sumo, both of them. And then, of course, it'll also declare any objects as name value pairs. And the nice thing about it is that, again, it sets up your resource objects and basically sets everything up for this to work. So again, a stack, AWS resources are also known as a stack. The stack are what resources I need to run. So if I want to run a web application, I need obviously an operating system. I need a web server. I need something to store this information. Sorry, those are the resources that I need for this. This template that we use, this CloudFormation template, is a JSON text file. And we're basically going to run this through CloudFormation, and it's going to spawn off and build up our environment and build up the resources we need, like an S3 bucket or various other sources, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, web servers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can use this CloudFormation template to build it. You can also use this CloudFormation template to tear it down. And I do recommend that when we're done with this class, you definitely want to tear it down so that you're not getting charged for AWS resources. As far as deploying this AWS resource solution, there's 4 boxes that you're going to see here. These 4 boxes are also test questions. So in the prerequisites, there's some prerequisites we got to do. We got to obviously have an AWS account. We need to have some access keys and access stuff. We need to collate certain required details. Where are we going to install this? What region and things like that. You're going to log in with your AWS credentials. And again, you're going to specify what region you want to deploy this to. Once you get that done, the configuration area, you're going to specify an AWS account alias. The AWS account alias, what are you going to call this? Then you define what apps and alerts you want, what CloudWatch metrics you want, and also any ALB log sources. Now, question, do both of you, actually 3 of you now, thank you very much, welcome Amir. And if I mispronounced that, I apologize. But do you guys all have access to an AWS account, the ability to generate an AWS account?
I do.
Eric does. Good. Robert and Amir?
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it. Okay, good. So this should work fairly well. Okay. One little warning here about your AWS account. If your AWS account is configured to provide certain metrics and certain information into Sumo Logic, you may wind up sending data into our training environment that maybe you're not interested in. Maybe you don't want. So here's a little warning here that I want to make sure that if you've configured your AWS environment to bring in certain data, keep in mind this data for this exercise is going to go into our training environment. If you don't want it to go into our training environment, which is a public facing environment, you probably don't want to go through this exercise, this first lab. Okay. But if you're just of a standard, AWS account and you haven't customized it to bring in certain things, you're probably going to be fine. Okay. And again, after we create it, we can also then tear it down if we want to. Okay. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Amir says, can I use my Sumo account? for this first exercise, you can use your Sumo account, yes, and you can have it go to your Sumo environment if you want, your company's Sumo environment. But I recommend you use the training environment. But yes, Amir, you can't. So understand that. I'll give you some specific directions as we go across here. So good question. So anyway, there's these two blocks: prerequisites, configure, and it's going to give you a diagram. It looks like this, and it says which of the following goes where. And one of the four prerequisites is one of the ones you want to check, and one of the four configurations of what you want to check. After we configure, and then we can do some optional optional parameters. We can talk about our CloudTrail sources, our Lambda Cloud Watch logs, and root cause explorer sources. Again, this is going to install everything that we need for ourselves. So it will install everything and configure it for us. Then finally, you're going to create and verify. You're going to look at check the check boxes and stuff on your CloudFormation template. You're going to click create a stack, and then it's going to start creating that stack. And it's going to take some time, but eventually that stack will complete. You'll be able to check your collectors to make sure they're there. You'll be able to check your dashboards and see that they're being populated. This is going to set up your AWS observability solution. So let's get into this. So here's what we're going to do, folks. First order of business is, if you're going to do this on the Sumo Logic training environment, I need you to log into the training environment. So just like yesterday, I need you to pick a 3-digit number, and I need you to type that 3-digit number into our environment here. So pick whatever 3-digit number you want. Again, you're going to go to service.sumologic.com, and you are going to log in as training plus admin with that 3-digit number, and the password is security22 exclamation. So you're going to log in here. Let me go and close some of this stuff up. Okay. And when you're logged in, just let me know you're all set. Okay. Amir, I understand you're going to use your Sumo Logic environment. Okay. I understand. Gotcha. All right. Thanks, Robert. And Eric, are you all logged in? All good. There you go. Super. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Eric. Okay, good. So again, we want to log in here. Now, what we're going to do, what the end result's going to be, is when we get done, we are going to find ourselves with an AWS observability template here. And if I open up that template, I should see a whole bunch of dashboards and things in here. I will tell you, I cleaned this stuff out, so I got rid of these. I should probably go ahead and delete them. Okay. Just bear with me, do a little housekeeping here. But what's we're going to see is we're going to see a bunch of dashboards here, and we'll see a bunch of collectors and a whole bunch of things. This is going to happen kind of automatically by using this CloudFormation template. So back to my slides for just a minute. Okay, and actually, let me do this. Let me go out here and bring up our help documentation. Help.sumologic.com. Again, our online documentation here. And if I go down here and if I look for, hang on a second, our observability solution. And if I click on our observability solution, you'll find that we can talk about how to set it up and all that fun stuff and how basically it's going to be configured. And so again, about the observability solution, if I go in here, it talks about what it does for you and how it basically sets it up, and it's one-stop shop. And as far as setting a collection, what we're going to use is we're going to use a CloudFormation template for AWS. Now, a question always gets asked, gee, do we have something for Azure? Do we have something for Google Cloud Platform? Not yet. We're working on it. Okay, so it is something that we're working on. Again, we're going to focus here on AWS Observability Collection right now. We'll talk about Kubernetes later. And so again, here's information about our AWS observability. And it talks about what resources we need before we deploy, certain prerequisites, all kinds of stuff. So one of the prerequisites is obviously you need to know what metrics you're going to bring in. Are you bringing in CloudWatch? What are you bringing in here as far as metric? What metrics do you have? What metrics do you want to span up? It'll also configure your AWS collector and sources. you need to make sure that your administrator account in Sumo Logic has the following rights. Now, you guys are all logged in as a training admin account. Your training admin account does have all of these rights, so you're all set. Another thing you're going to need is you're going to need your Sumo Logic access ID and key. So if you go into your Sumo Logic environment, if you go into down here in the lower left-hand corner where your account is, again, in your navigation panel. So if it's not open, open it up by clicking on the hamburger menu. Go down here and click on it. If you go into your preferences, here is where your access keys and access IDs are. And I would recommend that you create an access key here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a little text editor. Just a place to put this stuff. And I'm going to type in something like Sumo access ID. And I'm going to go ahead and create this. And I'm going to give this thing a name. I'm going to call it for AWS Observability. Okay. And if I click create key, it now shows me my access ID and my access key. I'm going to copy my access ID in here. And I am going to take Sumo access key. And I'm going to take my key and I'm going to copy it in there, because throughout the day today in this exercise, we will be using these. We'll use it for this exercise. We'll use it for a couple of other exercises. This lets us run under our credentials. Okay. So I'm going to create this key, and I want you to create that key. Now, something else you're going to need. Now, again, Amir, you're going to do this in your environment, your Sumo environment, right? The other thing you need is you need to know your organization ID, because when we run this CloudFormation template, we're going to send it to your environment. That is your organization ID. For Eric, Robert, myself, the organization ID will be this number right here. So again, in your profile, you'll see this organization ID. I'm going to copy that. And again, I'm going to add this to my text file. Okay. Amir, yours will be different. Okay. But again, if you should see it under your preferences.
Okay.
All right. So again, these are things that we've got to do. We also need your AWS credentials. So you need to log into your AWS account. So I've already taken the liberty of logging into my AWS account. Later on, by the way, we'll need to create an access key for your AWS information, but that's another, we'll do that in a little bit. But you need to log into your AWS environment. Now, also here in your AWS environment, what region do you want to install this AWS environment in? So you can pick whatever region you want. I'm going to grab US East 1, since I'm on the East Coast. I'm going to try to grab US East 1. Why is it giving me global here? Something's changed. Okay, fair enough. All right. So back to my slides. And again, my slides and my documentation pretty well match here, right? It's going to set up my Sumo Logic lectures and sources. I got to make sure my administrative account. And by the way, Amir, in your administrative account, you got to make sure you've got those certain privileges. So if you need me to go back and show you that, I certainly can. But you got to make sure your account has that. Again, I need to assume, I'm sorry.
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, good, good. And then, like I said, you need access to an AWS account. So again, before we deploy, we need to have those credentials, our AWS user, the region that we want to deploy the solution in, our Sumo Logic deployment name, our Sumo Logic access ID and access keys, and our Sumo Logic organization ID. Now, as far as deploying our AWS solution, if I go back to our documentation, before we deploy our Sumo Logic template here, you'll find, by the way, we've got a Terraform solution. We also have a cloud trail solution here. So I'm going to use this AWS Cloud Formation template. And so when I click on that, it's going to take me to my deploy with Cloud Formation template. And here, there is a link to click on the URL to get the latest Cloud Formation template. And I'm going to tell you, we improve this Cloud Formation template all the time. In fact, I'm going to show you some things that just got added to it. So when I click on this, I am now taken into my AWS environment because I've already logged into AWS. It passed me through. Here is my template. This is version 2.4.0. And it wants me to enter a stack name. So what do I want to call my environment? And I'm going to call it with my initials. And I will put in here today's date. Okay. You can put dashes, whatever you want to, but I'm going to, my initials and today's date. Now, it wants to know Sumo Logic deployment name. If you are using our training environment, you are using US1. Amir, in your Sumo Logic environment, if you look at the URL, if you see like US1 or US2 or whatever, it should tell you which one you want to use. If it doesn't specify, it's probably US1.
Yep.
So in the URL, you should be able to see whether it's US1 or US2.
US2 actually.
Excellent. Yeah, most of our customers are on US2. So select US2. Now it wants my Sumo Logic access ID. Here's where I'm going to go out here. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it. Then it wants my Sumo Logic access key because it's going to do a bunch of operations on my behalf with these credentials. In fact, I'm going to try to avoid grabbing leading spaces and trailing spaces. Okay. And then it wants my organization ID. We're telling it where to install this. All right. Now, do we want to give the ability to delete the Sumo Logic resources when we delete the stack? Probably you want that set for true. Okay. Alias for your AWS account identification, right? You can leave it blank if you're using stack sets, but otherwise you can put an alias for the AWS account. This is going to show up in our Sumo Logic Explorer view. So again, I'm going to put in here my initials in lowercase. I'm going to put in today's date, just so I can see what this is. Okay. If you want to map a bunch of AWS account IDs to your account alias, you can specify the object URL for that. We're going to leave that alone. We're not using stack sets, so we're going to not worry about that. And then do we want to install the AWS observability apps and alerts? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I'm going to say yes, we're going to go with the defaults. In fact, for all this, we're going to go with the defaults. Sumo Logic CloudWatch metric sources. We're going to use the Kinesis Firehose metric source. And then we're also going to provide all these lovely metric namespaces. This is all part of the template. If there's other metric source API URLs that you would like to incorporate in here, you could add those in there if you want. Then as far as your automatic load balancing log source here, we want to enable logging, and you can say, I want to enable logging for new things, existing things, or both. We're going to go with both. If I don't have those log sources created, do you want me to create them? Yes, we do. Do I have any other API URL stuff I want to create? Do I want to specify an existing S3 bucket? If I do, I put the name of that bucket in there. If I leave it blank, it'll create a new bucket for me. Path expressions for ALB. Again, this is stuff provided to show you where the ALB logs are. And again, here's my Sumo Logic CloudTrail source information. So I want to set up my CloudTrail log source. And again, I didn't specify my bucket name, so it'll create a brand new bucket for me. If you want to use an existing bucket, specify the name of that bucket. So we're basically going to go through here and grab all the defaults. That's what we're going to do, pure and simple. Okay. And in the case of our root cause explorer, we're going to go ahead and install our root cause explorer, both the X-ray source and the inventory source. Install both of those. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about our classic log sources here. And again, S3 buckets and all that stuff. This is something new that we've added. When we install this app, where do you want it to go? Do you want it to go in the personal folder or the admin recommended folder? I'm going to put it in the personal folder, and that's where I want you to put it. And then do you want to share this app with the whole organization? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You can always share it later if you don't. So I'll go ahead and make it available to others, but I'm also going to go ahead and delete it here in a little bit. So those are some of the new things we've added to this CloudFormation template in the last month. Now down here it says, hey, guess what? You are going to use CloudFormation and you're going to create AWS resources with custom names. And this AWS CloudFormation template is going to give the environment the ability to auto expand. So we're going to check mark those. And then all we have to do is go down here and say create stack. When I go down here and say create stack, you will see that it's going to start creating my stack. And as I refresh this, and as I refresh this, I will start seeing my stack starting to become created. Now, later on, when we're done with this exercise, when you want to delete it, all you should have to do is come in here, find your stack, and there's an option to delete that stack. And that will then wipe out that stack, and it should wipe out all the Sumo Logic stuff that happens. So again, it's building out my AWS stack. And this is going to take some time. This is going to take about 20 minutes or so. So what this stack is going to do is it's going to go out here in my Sumo Logic environment. And if I go out here to my collectors, again, I might be a little early under manage data here in my collection. If I do a search for my initials, it's not here yet, but eventually it will show up. Sorry, guys. This is not my collector that stood up yet, but it will eventually show up. Okay. I'll see my collection here. Let me get rid of this. I will see in my collection my AWS environment here. Let's see the option to collapse all, I think. I will see eventually my collectors show up. Okay. Additionally, I will see eventually in my personal folder my AWS observability show up. And when I go in here to new and I go into explore, I will eventually see a new AWS observability show up here. Not this one. It'll have my initials and stuff in it. So as the stack gets built out and gets done, I will see this stuff initially all happen. Okay. So just bear with me. It's got to create it. It's going to take some time. Are there any questions? Oh, and by the way, something else I forgot to do. My apologies here, folks. Let me upload for you guys a document that I'll show you here in just a minute that you guys can use to follow along with the labs. So if you don't mind, let me bear with me here a second. There you go. So this lab guide has our 3 labs that we're going to do. So here in lab 1, we deployed our AWS solution using this CloudFormation template. Now, again, you can use CloudFormation or you can use Terraform. Doesn't make any difference to us, but the exercise is written in CloudFormation. So for the fields and stuff you got to fill out, create your stack. Once the stack has been created, we will come back and see the various things that I showed you that we were going to have. So just bear with me and I'll come back and look at that. Any questions about that so far? All right. The second part of this, let me go back to my slides here for a second. The second exercise, and like I said, I'll verify this in just a little bit after our break. But the second part of this is that we want to set up a Kubernetes environment. We really want to set up clustering on a Kubernetes environment. Sorry, we want to set up, not clustering, I'm sorry, open telemetry on a Kubernetes environment. Now, if you've got a Kubernetes environment, you're going to find there's only two tabs, two commands you need to run to set up Kubernetes, to set up telemetry on your Kubernetes environment. So it's real simple. But because we don't have a Kubernetes environment, we got to build it all up ourselves. And so we're going to go through and do the Kubernetes setup. Now, again, hopefully you're familiar with Kubernetes and what it does. In fact, if somebody would like to explain to me what Kubernetes does, I would certainly appreciate it. Any of you administrators familiar with Kubernetes?
I'll take a stab at it. Kubernetes is just a containerized resource manager. It allows you to spin up nodes as need be, allows you to run your pods inside the containers, just to basically microservices, things like that, typically.
Okay, good. Absolutely right. So what happens is Kubernetes allows us, if we want to spawn off another environment, so we get a dev environment, a prod environment, whatever, we need to spin up another environment, we can use Kubernetes for that. As you mentioned, Kubernetes has something called a master node, which manages all my worker nodes, and then my worker nodes, which are my environments themselves. So I have a Kubernetes cluster, which you said is a container system, absolutely right. And it's going to sit there and manage these various things. So within my cluster, I have these various nodes. In my nodes, I have my various containers. In my containers, I have my various pods. And what we want to do is, and throughout Sumo, we want to be able to see across these environments. And so Kubernetes, by the way, runs on AWS. It runs on Google Cloud Platform. It runs on Azure. It runs on a lot of cloud different systems. And so, again, Kubernetes is something that's out there across the cloud, across the various environments. And we support them all. So we support Kubernetes, and we tried to make sure we stuck to Kubernetes specific things to make sure that Kubernetes standards, to make sure that we didn't get stuck in some strategy that was going to limit our ability to do things. As far as observing your Kubernetes environments, and sometimes they refer to Kubernetes as K8 because after the letter K in Kubernetes, there's 8 other letters, okay? It's going to give you visibility in your worker nodes, as well as managing the master node. And you'll find that we've got some built-in applications in Sumo Logic that you can use to see the master node and to see the worker nodes. So you can install those applications if you want. We want to be able to monitor and troubleshoot our container health, our replication, pod state, hardware resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As I said here, we've got Kubernetes, the application that looks at our worker nodes. I've got Kubernetes control plane, which looks at my master node. Now, this slide makes a great test question, because what happens when we install Kubernetes, we install it through Helm. Again, Helm open standard. And so what happens is your logs are going to be collected through FluentBit. So logs, FluentBit. Your events, and you're going to see a matching question here where it says match the following collection with the following source. So logs, FluentBit. Your events are going to come in through FluentD. Your metrics are going to come in through Prometheus. Our traces are coming in through OpenTelemetry, and your security is coming in through Falco Plus. So using Helm automatically sets up these collectors for you, and then you can enrich this. There's certain tags, metadata tags it's going to use, like service, deployment, namespace, node, but you can add additional tags if you want to. Now, one thing I neglected to show you guys, and I apologize, is where you can get a hold of our slides for this, because you're going to want these slides to take the exam. So once again, if I go back here into my Sumo Logic training environment, and if I go in here to my home tab and my certification tab, and if I click on get certified, you may not see all the boxes that I see here, but you will see this recorded live training. If you log in with your account in your Sumo Logic environment, you will see all the boxes. But as a training admin, as you're logged in, you won't see all of these boxes, but you will see this recorded live training. And in the recorded live training, if I look for Observability Administration Cert Jam, and if I register for it, lo and behold, here is a copy of our presentation, a recording. Here is the lab guide, excuse me, here's the slides, and then here's the lab guide. And I just uploaded the lab guide for you. So there's the lab guide, the slides to help you take and pass this exam. Because there is at least one test question based on this slide. Okay. You'll also need to know, by the way, that Kubernetes control panel deals with your master node, and Kubernetes application deals with your worker nodes. Okay. And as I said, you can also add additional key value pairs here. So best practices to ingest in your Kubernetes environment. Let's see what we got for a question here. Okay. No problem, Amir. Thank you. Again, you want to use your Kubernetes, metric and log data. You need to define what your structure is, your cluster, your container, your deployment, your host, things like that. So you want to make sure that you've defined that in your Kubernetes cluster so we can take advantage of those fields. Again, you can add additional fields if you want to in the key value pairs at the source. So in the source, if those of you had the admin class, we showed you could add a new key value pair if you want to add additional key value pairs to make it easy to search by. Sumo Logic automatically parses all of your some of your Kubernetes information if you've set up your fields correctly, of course. Like I said, setting up these fields. And then keep your access ID and key handy. We're going to need this for some of the work that we're going to do. So again, we're getting ready to do lab 2. But before we do lab 2, let me take a moment and see how my stack is doing. So back in lab 1, let's see how my stack is doing, still creating in progress. But if I go into my Sumo Logic environment here, and if I go into my collection, under manage data collection, let's see if I start seeing my collectors. All right, here we go. I did a search for JWM. Here I am seeing my AWS Observability JWM 0331. And if I put cursor over here, I can see it was just created, at 10:30 my time. Okay. So here I can see my collector and I can see my various sources. Just bear with me a second. Okay. So that's one thing that we can see. Great, wonderful, exciting. Also, when we did this template, it started to install for us our AWS Observability application in our personal folder. I'm not seeing it right here, so bear with me a second. Let me just simply try to do a refresh there. There it is. AWS Observability, 31 March 2022. And if I open it up, I see that there's some subfolders. And if I open up one of the subfolders, for example, events of interest, and I look at some of these dashboards, let's see, let's do account events. I should start seeing some data in here. So it automatically added these dashboards for me. And I can start using the data on these dashboards. Some of them don't have data yet. They haven't quite populated, but I'm now seeing this stuff. Additionally, as I mentioned, if I go into my Explorer tab, remember, it's still not finished yet, okay? But if I go in here, let's refresh this. If I go in here, there we go. Oops, shoot. Go to AWS Observability. Now under AWS Observability, I see my environment. I also see Eric's environment, by the way. And I can go in here and I can see under US East 1 where I installed it. I see it starting to build out some of my dashboards. Now, again, it's not done, but I can now start seeing some of my results and I can start seeing some of my dashboards. And, you have now incorporated AWS Observability for your AWS environment in here into Sumo. And you should be able to start seeing data here very soon. and start getting a sense for what's going on in your organization. By the way, I'm up here in New Hampshire, incoming activity, that's me. And down here in Virginia is where the AWS environment is. So I can see what's happening. So I wanted you to be aware that in lab 1, that's kind of the results of what we see in lab 1. Okay. Any questions about lab 1? Now in lab 2, what we're going to do is we are going to set up a Kubernetes environment. And again, if you already have a Kubernetes environment set up, you really don't have to worry about doing all this stuff. So for example, we're going to install some Kubernetes tools, install a Kubernetes cluster and all that fun stuff. Steps 1 and 2, you only need to do if you don't have a Kubernetes cluster stood up. I don't, so I do. Therefore, I am going to stand this thing up. Okay. So we're going to end up going through these steps. Now, I could go through the steps by the command here, which I really don't want to do, or I can go to my lab guide. So here in my lab guide, we are going to go through these various steps. Now it says here, these labs require me to have an AWS access key and an AWS secret access key. So let me go to my AWS environment here. And in your AWS environment, if you're looking at your identity and access management, you can, I can, we can, if we click on users and we click on security credentials, here is where I can see, excuse me, hang on a second. Hang on. If I go into my account here, there we go. In my account, under my security credentials, here's where I can generate an access key. Now, again, just like before, if I try to look at this access key, I can see the access key ID, but I can't see the actual key. So what I'm going to do is create another one. So I'm going to create an access key here. And I can download this if I want to. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my access key ID. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to add it to my notepad file here. So here is my AWS access key. And down here, I am quickly going to show this, copy it, and hide it again. So hopefully you guys didn't write it down. And I'm going to go ahead here and grab this. Hang on a minute. That's right. Okay. So there we got it. Okay. Now,
Hey,
what
John,
we're going to do is, yes, sir.
quick question. I think I missed a step. From within identity and access management under users, where do I go for the key? I missed that to create it.
No problem. So you're in your account, right? You're in users.
Yep.
And then you select your account. So my account here is Jay Meredith. And then here you've got a tab for security credentials.
Got it. I need to make a user still. Got it.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Yep. So there you go. And again, what this is going to allow us to do, this is going to allow us to do AWS events with your credentials. So rather than having to log in with your name and your password, multi-factor authentication or whatever, you're going to use these access keys to basically act as your login, your surrogate. Okay. Now, in the lab guide, the first thing it wants us to do is it wants us to go ahead and open up Terminal or PuTTY or whatever. So if you're on a Windows machine, you can open up PuTTY. If you're on a Windows machine, you may want to install Linux for Windows and use these various Linux commands. So I'm not sure what state those of you running Windows are in, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to swipe over this code right here. I'm going to copy this code. Again, I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to run terminal. So I'm going to fire up a terminal window here. And in my terminal window, I'm going to paste this code. Now, one thing that's going to happen here is it's going to do a bunch of carriage return and line feeds. It's going to screw things up. So if I backspace over this to connect it in here, if I try to run this, it's going to puke because it's one command. Okay. What I may want to do is take this out to a text editor, paste it. Well, that's even better. And try to, there we go. Get rid of that. I want to turn this into one command. And this is the joy of when you have printed materials, dealing with those printed materials. So now I should be able to take this command. And by the way, I'll put this command if you want to in the chat box. We'll make sure it runs first. There we go. Okay, good. It wants my password. Okay. And so now what this is going to do is this is going to install Homebrew, which is going to allow me to install my Kubernetes commands and all that cool stuff. So it's going to go ahead and do that. Now, this command that I just ran, if you want, I'll put it in the chat box to make it easy for you. Okay. And like I said, all it's doing is installing Homebrew. Then my next command, and some of these commands, by the way, will take some time, so just bear with me a little bit. The next command is I'm going to do a brew install AWS command line right here. So on the bottom of page 19, I'm going to copy this. And I am going to paste this. Actually, I'm waiting for this to be finished up. Sorry, it's not done yet. Patience is not one of my big virtues here. If I hit the enter key, nothing happens. I'm waiting for it to finish. Should eventually finish up here. This is where the fun begins, right? Waiting for things to finish up. By the way, for any of you who are on a Windows machine, let me see if I can find here real quick in my Google Drive. I think I've got a Windows version of these directions that might be helpful, but bear with me a second, folks. Let's go to my drive. Here it is. Let me take this, open it up for a second, generate a PDF, and upload that PDF. The directions for Windows, like I said, I've not really fully tested them. I had somebody else objectively test them, but I did write them from a Windows environment. But there's a lot more work that you have to do in the case of the Windows environment here. So let me go into the chat box. If you need the Windows version for this exercise, there is some directions for you that should probably help you out. Now, back to my terminal here. Terminal's still chugging along here. Huh. Now, I happen to know that I've got Homebrew already installed on my computer, so I can do a Control-C to get out of here. Should be able to do a Command-C to get that out of here. Control-C. Huh. Okay, then. Looks like I'm hanging out here in the breeze here. This thing should eventually time out or end. There we go. Good. Done. All right. So that took a while. Now, my next command is to have Brew install my AWS command line interface. So that's what we installed Brew, Homebrew. So it would do that. Now it's going to install my AWS command line interface. And it's going to install the things I need for that. Probably more than I really need, but now I can run AWS command lines. While that's going on, let me take a moment here and look at my documentation to see what's coming up next. Okay. After this, we need to go in and modify our AWS configuration profile. And we want to go ahead and change our AWS configuration profile here to add some information. So that's the next thing we're going to do when we get back to a prompt here. By the way, I will get to a point where we start creating the cluster, which takes a long time, and I will take a break. So in about 10 minutes, we will have a break. In case you're wondering. Yeah. Yep, no problem, Eric. I understand. Okay. So I am back here to a prompt. Let me make sure Eric is back. I'll give him a minute here to join. He had to reboot his computer after installing the stuff on Windows. Marcus and Robert, any questions from you guys so far?
Not on this bit yet. I guess the only thing that I did see on the AWS observability solution is that when I tried creating the stack, it said I had a 429 rate limit on the Kinesis source from the client of Sumo Logic.
Okay. All right.
And roll back the resources.
Yeah, roll back the resources. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Apparently, you've got a limitation issue that you've got to get resolved.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Because it looks like it came from the client of Sumo Logic itself, because it was the Sumo Logic API URL.
Yeah, it might be a privilege. It might be missing. Remember, I showed you those privileges. Oh, I'm sorry. If you're doing our training environment, you should be fine. You are working on a training environment, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. Good. Okay. All right. So yeah, there's that would probably be a tech support question. Hey, Eric, welcome back. Okay. So again, I installed the command line interface, got that done. The next item up here is we're going to do an AWS configure. And we're going to configure our AWS profile with things like our AWS access key and our secret access key and fill out some information. So when I go in here, and by the way, I could copy it or I can just, type it in. And then it's going to sit there and open up my AWS configuration. Hang on a second. AWS configure. Yeah, that should be right. If that doesn't work, I'll try a dash in there and see if it, there we go. Okay. I typed it in again. It worked. Like I put too many spaces in there. Sorry. So it wants my access key ID, my AWS access key ID. And here's an old one, but I'm going to go ahead and grab the new one that I have here. I'm going to copy it without any trailing or leading spaces. And I'm going to paste it in. And it wants my secret key. And then it says, what default region name do I want to use? Where am I going to install this Kubernetes cluster? And for whatever reason, the directions want us to install it on US West 1. I really don't care. But I'm going to go ahead and go with US West 1. That's fine. I'll go with that. I'm not really sure if I like that. I'm usually like in a US East 1, but that's okay. The default output format is going to be JSON. So if you need to type that in, JSON. And again, if I don't change the value, if I just hit the enter key, it's going to take my value that's already there. So I want it to be JSON. And then we've now configured our AWS profile. So now when I do things in AWS, it's going to use that profile information. So for example, here, the next thing I want to do is I want to run a command AWS S3LS. I want to see what AWS environments I have. And I can see there's a few AWS environments out there. So this AWS S3LS is going to list for me my AWS environments that I have. And then I can start installing my Kubernetes command line. So I'm going to, on step 6 here on page 21, I'm going to take this command and run it, and it will install my Kubernetes stuff. Okay, great, that's done. And let's see what kind we've got the chat here. Okay. Yeah, no, I understand that, Eric. I get that. And if you want to do this on your own or something, that's fine. I get it. After I've installed it, to make sure it works, I can go in here and type in EKS CTL -- help to bring up the pages, the manual pages, right? And I can see there's my commands and all that good stuff. So life is good. Now what I want to do here is I want to install the Kubernetes command line interface. So again, take that command, pasting it in here, and it will install my Kubernetes command line interface so I can now configure my Kubernetes environments. So that's done. Now, then I'm going to install Helm. I'm going to install Helm. So basically what I'm doing here is installing all the prerequisite stuff that I need to set up my Kubernetes cluster. I haven't set up a cluster yet. I'm just installing all the prerequisite stuff. Now here in lab 2, step 2, here's where we get to set up a cluster, okay? And so what I'm going to do is take this code, and I'm probably going to take it out to my text editor just to make sure I can make it one big command. So I can get it all here. There we go. I'll take it out to my text editor just to make sure I get one big command here. And the big thing we want to do here is there's a section that talks about your initials. Okay, and we want to replace this your initials with the brackets with your initials, because you're going to create a cluster called K8 Training Lab with your initials, and in the region of US West 1 with a minimum of 1 node, a maximum of 3 nodes. So this is the command that we're going to run, and this is going to start to create our cluster, and this command is going to take some time. So when I run it, whoops, you can up arrow. I think the problem is I also need to add a space here after region. So my bad. There we go. There we go. So this is going to create my cluster, and this is going to take some time. So here is where it's going to take about 20 minutes. So here is where I propose we take a 20-minute break. Okay. Sorry, not 20-minute break, excuse me, a 10-minute break, excuse me. So what I propose here is let's take a 10-minute break, and that we can get some more coffee and stuff like that. And I will see you guys back here in about 10 minutes. So here's the timer. When the timer gets down to 0, if you'd be back here, I would appreciate it. I'm going to step away myself. So we'll be back here in a little bit. Thanks. Okay, we are back. And Marcus and Robert just wanted to check in and see how things are going for you guys. Did you guys get a good break and everything's going for you okay on the exercise? Are you just watching or just trying to touch base to see what's going on? Just so you know, like I said, before we went on break, I told it to go ahead and start setting up my cluster. And so it's going to start building it and it's waiting for a response that says my cluster is built. It will take a little bit more time, it'll take about 10 minutes. But occasionally I'll get a tattletale message here saying waiting for, or it'll start building the cluster. So just about another 10 minutes or so, it should be done. While that's going on, though, I want to take advantage of and go back to my Sumo Logic and again, show you lab 1. So now when I go into lab 1, where we set up our AWS observability environment, now I see here's my AWS observability environment in my personal folder, and these should now start being filled out and they should start collecting data. So here in lab 1, I can see my AWS environment. I can see what's going on. I can see it, how my CPU utilizations are doing. Again, on my EC2 instance, I can go in here to my Amazon overview and I can see my AWS account information, see what's happening. Again, this is automatically installed when you use that CloudFormation template or the Terraform. Okay, this stuff automatically gets installed for you, so you don't have to sit there and worry about that. Additionally, if I go into my Explore option here, into my Explore option, here in my Explore option, if I look by AWS Observability, I see here's my JWM. Now, when I open it up, I should see some more information here. And again, I should start seeing some data here as far as what's going on. So starting to collect some data here. Again, I still don't have data and everything yet, but I can start seeing, actually, let me go into US East 1. Here in US East 1, again, I can see where things are happening. I've got no errors yet. I can start seeing some data, some collection data here. And so that's what lab 1 did. We automatically installed, excuse me, these dashboards here in my Explorer, and we also installed this app, this AWS Observability app, which also allows me to see what's going on. So that's what lab 1, okay? Marcus is in a meeting, so yeah, I get you. Thank you, Marcus, appreciate that. So yeah, like I said, this is one of those weird classes because there's a lot of hands-on, a lot of very technical things. If the commands are wrong, then there's problems. We got to troubleshoot all that. The commands we provided are good, but again, like for example, when I copy and paste it from a document, I have to, get rid of the spaces and all that fun stuff. So a little bit of work here. So in lab number 1, right, we got that done. We're seeing the results. We're seeing our cluster, that sort of thing. If you want to, if you're happy with your cluster, what you can do in lab number 1, you don't have to, I'm going to do it later today after the class is over. If I go into my stacks, my CloudFormation stacks here, I find here's my stack. And if I want to here, I can go into this stack and I can delete it if I want to. So I can go ahead and I can actually choose to delete this stack. Once it's all built out and, clean that fun stuff up. So again, when I finish up the class, at the end of today, I will delete the stack just to save Sumo Logic some money here. Okay. So I can go in here and like I said, I can clean this stuff up. All my events that made up this stack. There it is. Okay. It's still not done yet though. The build is still not done. Once it's done, I can delete it. Okay. In fact, if I go up here, again, if I find my raw stack, there it is. I can now make this stack and I can start deleting it and cleaning it up and all that good stuff. Okay. So there's that little thing. Back to my lab 2, building our Kubernetes stack, our Kubernetes cluster. It says here, it found this little message here about deploying stack, blah, blah, blah. So it started building my stack for me. Now it's got 1 node connected in there. It's built a stack of 2 nodes, but it's going to add a third node. So I'm just waiting for it to add the third node here. And then my Kubernetes stack will be done and I'll be back to a prompt. And this will probably take a few more minutes, just so you know. But it started building my Kubernetes cluster. Now, back to my directions, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get a pod status of our pods. So we're going to go ahead and swipe over this command here, and we're going to get a status of our pods in our cluster. So that's basically what we're going to do next as soon as my prompt comes back. So I'm just waiting for my prompt, and we go from there. So shouldn't be more than about another 3 or 4 minutes. While we're waiting, if you need to do something or whatever, feel free to. But I think, oh, here it goes. There it goes. I think there we go. We're done. Okay, finished up. So it built my cluster. Now, if I paste in this command, I should be able to see all the pods that are associated with my cluster. So there's my pods. And they're running and life is good. Actually, I think this one's mine. Now, again, if you already had a cluster stood up, all you have to do is to make sure that you need to install the Helm repository to your Sumo Logic space. And then you're going to run a Helm upgrade command to incorporate your Sumo Logic information here. So let me just go ahead and go through these 2 commands here real quick for you. And again, I'm going to flatten this out on my text editor. Hold on a second, something went wrong there. Okay. Things are whacked up here a little bit. Hang on. Shit. And let's make sure we've got everything there. There you go. Thank you. Yep. Robert, thank you very much. That would be the commands. So let me try to get rid of this. Okay. Hey, what? Let's take Robert's. Thank you, Robert, by the way. So I can take this command that Robert put in the chat box. I can run it. And again, what it's basically going to do is it's going to add my Sumo Logic. It's going to add the Helm repo to my Sumo Logic repo. And again, I've already done this. I did this a previous class or 2 ago. So it's already there. It says I'm going to skip this command. Now, the next command is where we are going to employ and put in here. You're going to take this Kubernetes environment and you're going to upgrade it and incorporate it into Sumo Logic. So again, I'm going to take this command here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to take it out to my text editor. And let's go ahead and flatten this thing out a little bit. Again, you want to make sure that you put in here, in that case, my initials and today's date, whatever I called this, right? JWM, and I believe I called it 0331, okay? Whatever your cluster name is. And then, oops, excuse me. And then you want to specify your Sumo access key. So again, back here to my lovely file here, my text file. I want to grab my Sumo access key. And I want to replace, excuse me, this with my Sumo access key inside double quotes. And I'm going to get rid of this. And I want my access ID here. My Sumo access ID. So basically what I'm telling it is, I want you to take this information and add it into my Sumo account. I want you to add these collectors and all that fun stuff. So let me copy this. Again, let me paste this right there. And let me flatten this thing out so I get rid of any carriage returns, line feeds, stuff like that. I am a little concerned here. Let me get rid of that. Oops. Okay, set. Okay. All right. So here is my command. And if I get it right, if I paste it in here and I hit it, there we go. Okay, good. So it says the collection doesn't exist. Installing it now. Okay, good. And so here's what happens when you do a Helm upgrade. If the collection doesn't exist, it installs it. If the collection does exist, it upgrades it. So it does both regardless. Okay. And so this command should work. By the way, I'm going to copy this command and paste it in the chat box, but you're going to want to change out, replace out my access IDs and access keys. And you're going to want to obviously change the cluster name to your cluster. Okay. But basically what we're doing now is we're adding Sumo Logic, or adding, registering this cluster with Sumo. And if, when it's done, if I go into my Sumo Logic environment, and if I go into manage data, and if I go into logs, sorry, collection, and if I search for my initials, I will eventually see a Kubernetes lab JWM 0331. And so now we have taken this Kubernetes environment and we brought it into Kubernetes. We brought in our Kubernetes environment here into Sumo Logic. And then if I wanted to, I could also then see that information in my Kubernetes environment. So here in my Explorer, I can pick on whatever Kubernetes view I want. And eventually here I will see my Kubernetes environment here. Bear with me a second, folks. It's obviously not done just yet. It's still running the script. Well, according to this, it's done. So they created my collector, and I should now be able to see here in a little bit my environment. Not sure why I'm not seeing it just yet. It'll take a while. It'll take a few minutes for it to show up. Okay. And that, by the way, typically takes care of the start of lab 2. Okay. So again, we can go into manage data collection. We can see our collection, our collector. And then, like I said, we should be able to see it on the Explorer as well. Now, to enable tracing, which is our third lab, we're going to do a couple things. We want to enable tracing, talk about enabling tracing for our Kubernetes environment. And then we're going to destroy our Kubernetes environment just so we don't incur any extra expense. And then we're going to show you how to set up tracing on a non-Kubernetes environment. So again, you are going to run the Helm command just like we did before, except that we're going to add a command that says set Sumo Logic traces enabled equals true. So if I copy this part of this command for lab 3, we're going to set up tracing now. And if I up arrow here in my terminal and I add that command in there, okay. Again, you gotta love this text editor and this this document we have. Okay. So here's the command. Again, all I'm doing is adding the ability to enable my traces. It's all you have to do. You have to add Helm, and then you've got to add your Helm to your repo, and then you've got to enable the tracing. So now I have set up, or as soon as this command runs, I will have set up and enabled tracing. Then I will be able to go into Sumo, and I will be able to go in here to new and service map, and I will start seeing my traces in here. Now, the problem is we set up a Kubernetes cluster. We didn't put anything on that cluster. We didn't put a web server on there or anything to provide transactional data, but I would be able to see objects in here. These two objects, by the way, that are here in traces in my service map, those are what we're going to see here in just a little bit. You and I are going to set up tracing on a non-Kubernetes environment, and we're going to generate objects like this. Okay. So again, we're waiting for this cluster to run. Again, it should be upgrading my cluster, enabling my traces. Just waiting for it to finish. Any questions as we're going through this? Just to kind of get us back into the slides here a little bit. Again, in lab 1, we focused on setting up our AWS observability solution. In lab 2, we stood up a Kubernetes environment so that we could turn tracing on and for our Kubernetes environment. And in lab 3, we're going to talk about setting up OpenTelemetry and tracing. And so here at the start of lab 3, we're going to enable it on our Kubernetes environment. And that's what I'm waiting for this command to finish. And I'm still waiting for it to finish. I don't recall it taking a long time, but patience is not one of my virtues. And then once this is done, then my tracing will be enabled, and I'll be able to, if my Kubernetes cluster is doing things, I'll be able to see that results of those transactional traces. While I'm waiting, let me go back here and see if in my Explorer, I am starting to see my Kubernetes environment here. Still not. Interesting. All right. Still running. Okay. Because the next thing we would do after this, just so you know, in our lab guide, is we would delete the cluster. Delete the cluster, save some money, you know, that sort of thing. So in lab 3, all we're doing is set up tracing in our Kubernetes environment. Now, there's another part to lab 3, a whole big part. We're going to set up tracing in OpenTelemetry in a non-Kubernetes environment. So that's a whole nother story, a whole nother thing that we're going to wind up doing. I just want to let this thing finish up first. I wish it put a tattletale or something on here, give me some sort of status or, you know, some sort of indicator saying, yeah, I'm working on it. I'm thinking. So it will eventually resolve itself. While this is going on, I'm going to take my stack set here. And I am going to delete it. Okay, this is lab 1. I'm going to delete my stack from my stack, my CloudFormation template here. I'm going to go ahead and delete my stacks, and that should also pull everything out of Sumo Logic as well. So again, I'm going to go ahead and start tearing down my stack from lab 1. All right, lab 2 is done. Upgrade failed. Pre-upgrade hooks failed. Timed out waiting for condition. Interesting. Got to look into that. But in lab 2, what I can do here, finish this up before I get into lab 3, or I'm sorry, lab 3, part 8. Go back to the previous page. Come on. I can delete my cluster just to save your company, my company, whatever, some money. Take this lovely code, copy it to my text editor. I'm sure most of you realize that we should have put the gray as the background in the directions there. It's kind of silly. And so here is my command that's going to go out and delete our cluster. And then we're done with terminal for a while. So there's my command. And paste that command in, run it, and it should start deleting my cluster here fairly quickly. No cluster found for name Kate, training lab, JWM. Zero 331. Okay. K8 training lab, JWM. Let me. I put quotes around this just for fun. I don't think it's going to change anything. Yeah. Okay, I have to look into that. All right, so back to my documentation here, back to lab 3, 3A is done. 3B, what we're going to do is take a non-environment, a non-Kubernetes environment. I'm going to show you how to set up traces, okay? So in order to do this, we want you to launch your AWS console. And in your AWS console, we want to look for the AMIs. So here in our AWS console, we want to go into services. We want to look for, hang on, EC2 instance. There we go. We want to find EC2 instance, EC2 instances here. And in our EC2 instances, we want to scroll down until we find AMIs. And so here in our AMIs, we can search for AMIs and select an AMI. Now over here where it says owned by me, we want to change this to public images. And what we want to do here is we can search for the word illuminate observability. So if I type in here, illuminate, or just illuminate, let's see what happens. Okay, there it is, illuminate observability. Now, this is the image for North Virginia or US East 1. Depending on what region you are in, you'll find there are other AMIs here. So for US East 1, US West 1, US East 2, US West 2, and so forth and so on. These are where the images are. I want you to choose an image in your region. I want you to find that particular image, this image right here. And we are going to, in fact, launch this image. So we're going to go ahead and launch this image from this AMI because this image already has a web server and stuff on it to save you some time. Okay. This image is already pre-built with a lot of stuff that you need. Now, if you don't mind, back to my directions. When I tell it to launch this image, it's going to tell me as far as what size and stuff I want. We want T2 large. So, sorry. Back here, we want T2 large. And then we're going to go ahead and hit next, configure instance details. We're going to take all the defaults in here. Next, we're going to add storage. Going to take all the defaults there. Next, we're going to add tags. Obviously, you want to recommend that you add a tag to this. You know, maybe you want to put in here maybe a key and a value, something that says, you know, what environment this is, right? So maybe I want to call it, you know, key is image, and my value is for Sumo class, whatever. Just so you know basically what this is for and why you might want to get rid of it. We'll then click the next to go to the security group. And here is where we're going to want to change a couple things. So here in our security group is where we control the firewall and the access and all that good stuff. So what we want to do is, I'm sorry, they told me to change the name, the key to name and my open telemetry lab, whatever you want to use. But this configuration group, we are going to add additional port of 8080. So we're going to go in here, we're going to add another rule. Again, the port is going to be 8080. Sorry, 8080. There we go. And then here under source, you're going to only allow this to be accessed by your IP. Okay, your IP. So it will look your IP up. Additionally, we are going to change the other rule up here, the SSH, so it only can be accessed by your IP. So I'm going to change that to my IP as well. So the point is only I can connect in through SSH and only I can connect in through port 8080 to test this thing out. Now, obviously, once I get it up and running, I can open it up to other things, but for right now, this is what I want. So we got that information in, we'll go ahead and hit review and launch. And it says, okay, it's not eligible for free tier. And those of you on free tier, I'm sorry, you probably won't be able to do this, but I'm not on free tier, therefore I can launch this. And then it says, okay, how are you going to connect? How are you going to encrypt and connect into this environment? I can tell it to create a new key pair for me, or I can use an existing key pair that I have already stored. So I have key pairs on my computer. And so this is how you're going to be able to connect into this and authenticate into this using those key pairs. In my case, in my computer, in my downloads directory, I have this key pair, and that's what I'm going to use to connect to it. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this instance. Again, you may want to create a new key pair if you don't have one. And it's now going to, in fact, launch our instance. I can view my launch log, see what's going on. I can actually go into view this. Let me view my instances here. So here it is, it's pending. Again, I can refresh it from time to time. When it's up and running, life will be good. There it is, it's up and running. So instance is running. I can click on this instance ID. And here in this instance ID, here is my instance ID. Here is my public IP address, my private IP address, all of that good stuff. Under the connect button, if I click on the connect button, here is how I and you and others can connect to this. We can connect using an EC2 instance. We can connect through a SSH client. We're going to connect through SSH client. Okay, that's typically how we connect. So what I can do is if I need to, I can change the permissions on my EC2 key pair. So I can run this command. So I can go into terminal again. And in my terminal, I want to change to my download directory. So I want to go to my downloads directory, which is where my PEM files are, ls*.pem. Okay, there are my PEM files. Okay, so I can see them. They're in my downloads directory. And what I want to do here is I want to change the permissions on this EC2 key pair. I've already done it, so it's not a big deal. But again, I'm going to do it again just so it's done. And then to connect to my environment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this command right here. Now, there's one little change you need to make to this command. If I take this command and copy it and paste it and try to connect using this statement, I'm going to make an SSH connection using my EC2 key pair PEM file, using my root at whatever account. Now, it's going to balk at me and saying, hey, look, I'm going to say yes here. It's going to balk at me saying, hey, I don't know who root is. I need you to use an EC2 user. So it says, please log in as EC2 user rather than root. So let me go ahead and exit out of this by doing a Control-C to get out of it. Do an up arrow. Let me change this to say EC2-user. That's the account it wants us to log in as. Now, when I run it, I am now connected in. I can see what stuff is in my directory right now. I can do an ls command to see what I'm looking at here. You'll find there's an Apache Tomcat directory. There's an AWS directory. There's a bin directory. There's a config.yaml file that we'll talk about. There's a jar file. We have set this all up for you to make this easy for you to set up OpenTelemetry. Now, if you want to set up OpenTelemetry, obviously, what you're going to want to do is look at our documentation. So where do we find our setting up OpenTelemetry here in our documentation? Well, let's just do a search for OpenTelemetry. And so all the information you need for this can be found here. By the way, we're also running an OpenTelemetry beta. We're basically trying to switch out of some of our proprietary collectors into using OpenTelemetry. So this is not where I want it to go. Bear with me a second, guys. Sorry. Let's go back here again. Okay. All of these are going to get me where I want, but what I'm going to start with, I'm going to look at traces. So let me make it easy on myself if I can. Let me go back here. Okay, I want to go into the traces chapter. So in the traces chapter, here's dealing with transactional tracing, working with transactional tracing and all that stuff. Here is where the information is for you and for I to set up our environments that we want to for OpenTelemetry. So we want to set up collection tracing on another environment or on an AWS environment. And we can use, again, all kinds of different tools here, play around here, all that fun stuff. In the case of AWS environments, I could use make it a little easier, or I could just use the OpenTelemetry standard. If I click on this other environment, so they changed the documentation on me recently, so bear with me while I go through this and play around here just a little bit. Yeah, here is typically where I want to set up my traces, and this is the instructions for my traces. Now, you and I are going to go through these instructions anyway. So again, we stood up our environment, we filled it out, we connected to it, life is good. The next thing that we want to do is, and we did our connection here, right? We did our connection, we can see what's going on. We can go into our startup.sh directory in our bin directory, so bear with me a moment. They want to make sure that my hang on a second, change directory, bin, okay. I'm in my bin directory and they want me to do a /startup.sh. And this is going to start up my Apache server. Whoops. Let's do an ls here. Okay. Let me modify this just a little bit. Go back. Let me change directory to Apache-Tomcat/bin. There we go. Now I can do my /startup which is a script file that's going to start up my Apache server. Now that Tomcat started, I can, if I want to, go out here where I connect to my environment. And I can, this is my public DNS information. I can copy this. I can bring up a web browser and I can paste this information in, except that I want to add an 8080 at the end of it. I want it to go to 8080, not port 80 by default. And now I can see, here's my web server. So I've started my web server, it's up and running, and from my browser on my computer, I can see that web server, okay? Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up tracing such that when I click on these buttons, I will see some activity showing me that I clicked on these buttons, okay? That's ultimately what we're gonna wind up doing. Now, probably a good idea to bring down my server. So again, the command for that is // shutdown.sh. Jan. Okay, that will bring my environment down here. Okay. So back to my directions. We tested it out. We connected in. We can see what's going on. They can also do a curl command, another way of testing it up, and life is good. Now, in order to make this work, we are going to go ahead and set up a collector, and we're going to set up a source, okay, to set up OpenTelemetry. So we're going to sit there and generate a collector and a source. So the way we're going to create this collector is we're going to go into here, going to go into our navigation panel, go into manage data, go into collections, and we are going to add a collector. This collector that we're going to add is a hosted collector, and you can put its name as anything you want. I'm going to use JWM OT collector for OpenTelemetry collector. Put in the description if you want, put in the category if you want. Here's where you can add those key value pairs, but we don't need to worry about that right now. Basically, I'm just going to give it a name and I'm going to click save. That's how hard it is to create a hosted collector. Now, if I, for some reason, say I don't want to add a new source here and I want to add a source afterwards, I can go into, hang on a second, OT, find my collector here. There it is, JWM OT collector down here. If I want to add a source here and I didn't add it when I was prompted, here's where I could add my source. To do our HTTP traces, do tracing, this is where we're going to add our HTTP traces source. So again, we're going to give this thing a name, right? Call it anything we want to. I'll put my initials in here and I'll call it OT traces or OT source. And then we recommend that you put a source category in here, right? You don't have to, but we recommend it. So I'm going to call this OT/JWM. Okay. And when I click save, it gives me this URL. Now, this URL, ultimately, I do want to copy, and I do want to paste and put in my text file somewhere. So back to my text file up here. Let me paste that in. Okay. By the way, it might be easier on me if I make this text file a little bit bigger. There you go. We're going to use that later. Now, if I click OK here, and if I want to go back into it later, all I have to do is click on show URL, because you will need that URL. That URL, we're going to put in one of our files to tell it how to connect to Sumo. It's going to go to that particular URL. So here is my source that's waiting, listening for this data. But we've got to go in and configure on our host machine, our AWS environment, how to use that host. So we created our collector and we created our source. Okay. And there we go. Now we need to go out here and modify our config.yaml file and add that source in there. So there is a configuration file link that you can get and you can download and all that stuff. But in our environment, we took the liberty of providing you a config.yaml. So here in my environment, if I get out of my bin directory, and I get out of my Tomcat directory, if I do an ls to see my stuff, you'll see I do have a config.yaml. And if I open up my lovely VI editor, VI space config.yaml, YAML, it opens up my config.yaml file. Now, you might notice that my cursor here is at the bottom where it says traces endpoint. And that's where I want to have my URL. So in order to be able to change this, I'm going to hit the insert key on my keyboard. So I'm in the insert mode. Bear with me a second. Shift I, there we go, Shift I. Shift I will put me in the insert mode here. There we go, I'm now in the insert mode. I want to arrow out here to my trace endpoint, and I want to make sure there's a space after my colon, okay? I want to make sure there's a space after my colon. And then I'm going to go out here and I'm going to grab this lovely URL. And I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to paste it. There it is. Okay. And it should be a nice, long, complicated URL. Now I'm going to hit the escape key to get out of insert mode. And then I'm going to type in a colon WQ, which is write and quit. And that will then take me out of VI. I have now modified my config.yaml file. So I've modified my config.yaml file. And we are all set and ready to go on that. Now, the next thing you need to do is you need to have the OpenTelemetry collector binaries. And there's a link here to find those binaries. I can click on that link. Again, it takes us to our documentation and it talks about where these lovely binaries and stuff are. And you can go in here and grab the, there's a template. And then down here is where the, there we go. This one right here is where our binaries are. Okay. And again, you can see here's the latest that's been approved. You can see earlier ones, see some pre-release ones. You'll see some that are, we don't recommend you use. Okay. But you can see which the latest telemetry ones we have. Eric, understand, appreciate you not trying to rep. Okay. 2 questions. What was the security plus admin password? I had security 22 at security 22 exclamation mark. You forgot the exclamation mark, Eric. Okay. Be possible to get a link to this or any other pre-recorded version of this class? Yep. I'm sure the slides are missing some of the details you are providing. You're absolutely somewhat correct there. You're right. It's a different approach. But to answer your question, Eric, and it's a great question, you can go into Sumo Logic. Again, click on the home button, click on certification, click on get certified. And here under get certified, sorry, wrong place, sorry. Here under recorded live training is where you can get recordings of any of our classes. So here, Eric, is where you can get a hold of a recording of this class. Hopefully you're in the right. And there you have Josh Brotheim, our manager, doing this class. By the way, he's doing it later tonight. And then here's a copy of the slides and the lab guide as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate you asking, Eric. One thing I've learned through the years, if somebody has a question, probably somebody in the room has the same question. So I appreciate you asking. And again, you can see any of our courses and see the recordings and see all that fun stuff. So yeah, I realize for some of you, you had to do and install other things and do other things. Therefore, you probably felt way behind and you want to go back and play with the stuff on your own. So again, appreciate the questions. Now, again, we are normally would go down here and we would download the OTel or OpenTelemetry collector that we need here for your operating system, whether you're running Linux or you're running Darwin or whatever the heck you're running. We've already done that for you. So in this image, you already have the OpenTelemetry file there. You don't have to worry about it. It's there, it's installed. What we do have to do is we do have to run it, okay? So what we're going to do here, and I showed you where you can find these OpenTelemetry files. What we do have to do, here's our wget command to download that file from our website if you need to. And then you're going to change the permissions of it if you need to. But again, we've already done that for you. So we happen to be on Linux environment running AMD 64. Now, in order to start this configuration file, we're going to open up a terminal directory. And in that terminal directory, we're going to run this command. So I actually need to have two terminal windows open. So I am going to click copy here. And if I want to, from my existing terminal window, I can open up a new window or new tab in here. And in this new window, I need to be able to connect to my environment. So I need to connect to my remote host. So once again, I'm going to go back here to my connect statement. I'm going to take this lovely code right here. I am going to go back here. I'm going to change my directory to my downloads directory, where my PEM file is. I'm going to paste this in, and I am going to arrow over here and change this to EC2 user. EC2-user. And I'm going to log in. So now that I've connected in, here again, I can see all of these lovely commands, lovely things. And what I want to do per the directions is I want to run this command. So I'm going to go back, take this command, I'm going to paste it in. And what this command is going to do is it's going to run my OpenTelemetry. So it's going to sit there and open up and run my OpenTelemetry here, and it's going to leave this thing open. I should see some tracing statements and stuff in here in just a minute. And there you go. So here's my tracing statement. Everything's ready to go. We should be able to process data and all that good stuff. Now, back to my directions. So we are running this little rascal. Now what we need to do is we may need to log in and start our Apache access again. So that's why I wanted two windows. So I can go back to the other window and I can start up my Apache access directory again. And I need to also modify my setup environment variables in here because I need to incorporate, make sure that this hotel is part of my path statement. Okay. So you'll find we've already done that for you. But if I go back here to my other window, let's go to this other window. If I go into my, actually, let's do a quick vi set env.sh. We've added these commands for you. And we've called this service name Sumo Training. Okay, we've done this for you. We've modified this. Life is good. I'm going to do a colon Q for quit. Get me out of there. And then what I need to do is I need to actually move this over into my Apache directory. So I'm going to do a CP for copy, set environment.sh, and I want to copy it into slash Apache dash Tomcat slash bin. Okay. And now I want to change directory to my Apache dash Tomcat slash bin directory. And I want to once again start up my Apache server. Now, again, this has stored all of my commands. So if I just hit the up arrow keys, I can see there's that ./startup sh file. And when I run it, it's now going to restart my Apache server, connecting it to my my hotel OpenTelemetry connections. And so now if I go to my website here in my web browser, and apparently I closed it down, shame on me. Now, if I start clicking these buttons, it should start, throwing some errors. I got a 403, access denied. Let me go back, manage app. Let me again, 403, access denied, host manager, 403, access denied. But what I should now see here in my Sumo Logic environment is if I go into new and if I go into service map, I will eventually start seeing new buttons appear from my services. There we go. Sumo training. There it is. It showed up. So here is where, and I can go into this and I can open this up in traces and I can see all the traces and transactions that have occurred. Here are the Maris 403s. Here's the 200s that work when I went back. So this is how you and I set up tracing in Sumo Logic. It is not terribly complicated. But obviously the question is, where all do you want to set tracing? What things do you want to set tracing on? That sort of thing. What transactional information do you want? Notice it automatically gets me a lot of this information. Where am I at? What page? What thing? What's going on? How long? The number of steps, the number of errors, and again, I can break this down. So that's a quick little introduction or setup into setting up traces for Sumo Logic. And that pretty well wraps up lab 3. So as I said, in lab 3 here, you specify, you run this little rascal, and then lo and behold, you are seeing your traces. Yeah. Of course, what I probably should do is I should probably stop my Apache server, bring it down, and I can go to my other window if I want to, and I can stop my traces because I don't need that anymore. And actually, I can go out here and delete this if I don't need it anymore. So let me switch to the other window. Let me do a Control C to get out of there. There we go. Good. Okay. And then, of course, I can go out here and take that image, that AMI file that I found, and I'm going to go and kill that all. And I can obviously get rid of it. So I can go back in here to this instance. Now that I'm done with this lab, I can go back to instances into my specific instance. And if I want to here, I can go ahead and delete it, terminate it, and save myself once again some money. Okay. So that cleans that up. And that pretty much wraps up labs 1, 2, and 3. So again, in lab 1, we used a CloudFormation template to set up our AWS observability solution. You could have used Terraform as well. Lab 2, we set up a Kubernetes cluster using command lines. And then we installed and set it up using the Helm update command to set up tracing on it. And if we were doing anything with that Kubernetes cluster, we would be able to see those transactional traces right into Sumo. And then in lab 3, we set up transactional tracing, like I said, on our Kubernetes environment, but we also then blew that environment away. And then we also used a non-Kubernetes environment setting up transactional traces. And that basically is what we have done. Now, who's ready to take the exam? All right. Again, just to help you out here a little bit, to get to the exam, we want to make sure you log out of our Sumo training environment and you log into your company's environment. So again, if you're logged in with training plus admin in here, you can open this up if you need to. Click on this and click on sign out. We want to make sure you log in with your name so you get credit for passing the exam. So you're going to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment with your name and your credentials. And when you do that, to get to the exam, you will click on the House tab here, the Home tab. Click on Certification. Click on Get Certified. Here in Get Certified, you're going to click on the Get Certified panel. You're going to find this exam, the Observability Administration exam right here. And when you register for it, you click on the little button there and boom, you're instantly registered. Now, I do want to warn you about this exam. When I click start, it only has 20 questions, just like yesterday's quiz. It's a new quiz, so we're only going to give you 20 questions, and you got 60 minutes to complete it. And the passing score is not a 75, it's a 70. Again, it's open book, open notes. You can ask me questions. You can ask Odell questions. We'll gladly try to help you. When I do click next and I go in here and see the exam, says it's got 20 questions, 60 minutes. Yeah, what the heck? Sign me in, coach. Send me in. So it says drag that and drop the activity under the correct solution step. Remember I said there was a test question on that one slide, right? So here I'm going to select the check boxes. Sorry. That's actually in this one right here. CloudWatch metric source is under configuration. Lambda is under optional parameters. Deployment region is right there. And so there's question number 1 answered. And again, you can go back to the slide and see the answers. Match the concept to its description, right? What is a stack? A collection of AWS resources that you manage as a single unit. There you go. AWS observability solution. A system that automates our deployment, management, and scaling. Template. A template declares the AWS resources that you want to configure. And then Kubernetes helps you isolate and solve. Actually, I may be wrong here. Hold on, let me change this back to help me isolate. And my Kubernetes is a system that lets you deploy, automate, scale. There you go. That's better. I'm going to click this and submit it. And then I'm going to say, I'm done with the answers. I'm done with the quiz. And it says, hey, you didn't answer them all. But I'm going to say, I don't care. So obviously I'm going to fail, but I want you to see that when I fail, I can see what questions I got right. Well, that's interesting. I got that one wrong. I should have gone back and looked at the slide, but I can see what I got right, what I got wrong, and then I can click submit results, and it will then submit my results. So as you go through this quiz, if you get stuck on a question or something, you need to see a slide, please let us know. Otherwise, are there any questions here before I turn you loose on the exam? On behalf of myself, Odell, and everybody at Sumo, I want to thank you for attending. Hope you guys have a great day and a great weekend coming up. Please be safe. And I am going to stop the recording.